Have that recorded. Great. So here we are in April, Agile, Rhode Island, monthly meetup. And we're fortunate to have Dorothy Abbott, a thought leader and change agent who's passionate about partnering with executives and organizations to deliver maximum business value, reduce weight, and continuously improve products, efficiencies, and people's abilities to adapt, unlocking people and teams' potential to maximize their own performance. She has over 20 years experience in the IT space with many different domains and has spent the last 15 years coaching organizations on not only the way they work, but also transformation from project to product, leadership development, and organizational design. So I will pass it over to Dorothy.
Thank you.
Let's see how
A
Zoom.
little screen challenged. I managed to travel without my mouse.
Gotcha. See if we're in person, I'd share. But
yeah, let me minimize my Zoom controls here so I can. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much. So tonight we're going to talk about leadership effectiveness and the impact around that, and get into some specifics on how we can grow leadership effectiveness and how we can scale them. Now, I'll be the first to say I've been heavily distracted, so we have a very light deck, and feel free to jump in at any time and ask questions. And if you can't hear me, let me know and I can switch mics again. All right. So one of the things that Doug kind of highlighted on is my experience, and through that, you'll see a couple certifications behind my name there. I'm never on a certification path. I'm always curious about other things, and sometimes they lead to a certification. I'm very fortunate with my International Coach Federation journey, and I went down that path to better coach and facilitate people, leadership, and teams and then I got the opportunity to prove my knowledge and mastery to ICF with that mid-level certification of a professional coach. The next one you see on there is the International IC Agile. They have a newer mastery program that's expert in enterprise coaching. You'll also probably familiar with their expert in agile coaching. This one's enterprise coaching, and it's mastery based. So it's not just go take a 2-day class and take a quick test. This is truly a 6 or 7 month journey, and as well as progressing yourself as a leader. It's also about reaffirming those coaching skills and proving mastery to the IC Agile board. All right, page down. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about the relationship between leadership effectiveness and the impact to business results, ways to achieve your leadership effectiveness and how to build that development plan to increase that. And then we'll talk briefly about ways to scale those leadership skills to your teammates. And I specifically say to your teammates instead of your direct reports, because I truly believe all of us are leaders, and we can walk in and showcase those leadership skills and effectiveness to our teammates and those around us. All right, so as we know, management is about stability and getting results today, whereas leadership is about change and achieving greater results beyond just today, the strategy. When you think about that strategic focus, not just for a quarter, but a year, 3 years, 5 years in advance. So not only by only doing more of what you do today, you won't get to where you want to go tomorrow. So change is central to that. So as we know in today's realities, there's a lot of disruption across all the industries. Hyper competition, new competitors. We really see that in the FinTech tech space. We see the national to global market shift. We're accelerating the pace. Ambiguity. Lots of regulation out there today, and budgetary pressures are always there. So there was a CEO study recently that confirmed that escalating complexity is the #1 issues they're dealing with today. Now with that, VULCO, volatile, uncertainty, complexity, is a leading to stress and uncertainty. And leaders across the world are telling us that more and more is required of the leadership. Leaders admit to feeling overwhelmed, over their head. They're dealing with things that they've never dealt with before. The skills that have gotten them where they're at today is not enough to get them to the future. The complexity is outpacing their learning. They're so focused on trying to get through today, they don't have time to focus on leadership. And many are concerned there's not enough time to do all that's required. And this is where we need to shift from knowing to learning, and from controlling to empowering. And as we know, leaders bring the weather. They, to a large degree, define what can and can't happen within their organizations. And I'm sure all of you can think about, in past situations or even your current situation, how the leadership team defines what that culture is like in the company. So when we think about leadership, there's 2 structures in mind. The first one is anxiety or reaction. So there's a problem, they see it as a problem or a threat. They react in fear. Okay. And you can see their effectiveness ebbs and flows over time. It causes anxiety with them, and they try to contain it and reduce it. The flip side of that is when they are outcome focused or creative focused, they see those not as a problem threat, but as a purpose and a vision. They have passion behind it, and they take action. So, and they're energized by it, and it's unleashing, as you can see. And their effectiveness, you can see, starts low and over time increases. Now, how leaders have thought about leading effectively in this new way of working is really about their mindset. Is your mindset prepared for working in an agile way? And again, that mindset is a collection of beliefs, values, assumptions, and experiences, often unconscious ones, that help inform how you interpret your world and take action. Achieving a sustainable transformation requires conscious, personal, and collective leadership transformation, while it is sustained organizational-wide systems change. So we want to help them shift from reactive, defensive, and excuse-making to creative, purposeful, and outcome-focused. Okay, and that shift starts within before we can ask any, their team members or their direct reports to do this. So when we talk about leadership effectiveness, and this is specifically comes from data that the Leadership Circle has correlated over doing thousands of assessments, you can see on the bottom half of this circle is all reactive tendencies from complying, protecting, and controlling. And you can see in a larger piece, when they're reactive, how that impacts their effectiveness. So in the complying, their effectiveness is a minus 0.63. Their protecting is again a minus 0.56. They're controlling minus 0.41. When they move into that creative space, you see those shift from where they're relating moves to a 0.5. And there's a correlation between that controlling and that relating. So you can see the minus on the reactive, where they're minus 0.41. When they move to that relating space, it shifts hugely to a 0.85. Another relating one, we see self-awareness within themselves and around them becomes a positive 0.76. And again, we still see some of that correlation coming from the controlling and a little bit from the protecting. Authenticity. And the correlating one to that is the protective on the reactive. You can see it moves from a minus 0.656 to a positive 0.78. And again, as we move around here to systems awareness, 0.84, and then achieving a 0.91. And you can see these top questions that they ask of, I'm satisfied with the quality of leadership that this leader provides. This leadership is the kind of leader that others should aspire to become. And we'll get into a little bit more about how that impacts scaling leadership. This leadership is an example of an ideal leader. We see them modeling the behavior and living it. This leadership helps this organization thrive. Again, they're impacting the weather in a positive way. Lastly, overall, this leader provides very effective leadership. And we do this through a 360 to see this. Feel free to jump in questions along the way.
Hey, Dorothy, just quickly, so this scale, where would the results, are these like surveys of people who report to the leader, or is this like an evaluation? How does that kind of
So this is specifically from one of the benchmark 360s that are out there today. This one's specifically done by the Leadership Circle, and thousands of people and the 360s they've done to generate this data. The other nice thing is they've done some additional work in the last couple of years, especially with the amount of diversity, inclusion, and equality that have come into play, is to really look at the mix of what's in here and say, are we really looking at a sampling of that includes everyone, or are we just only sampling one race or one sex? And they really dug into the data and said, no, this globally is truly the correlations for leadership effectiveness, no matter what domain, where in the world you're at, no matter what race, culture, or any of these things. This is a very good holistic view.
Cool.
Thank you, Doug, for the question. My mouse left. Now, on the flip side of that, as we talked about, and I put in the agenda, is how does that correlate to performance in this at a business index? And again, still leveraging the Leadership Circle, they went back and they talked to these key large companies that had people come and take this, and they said, okay, we're looking at business performance index. Okay, and you can see with an index of 1, leadership effectiveness comes in at 0.61. And then the subsets underneath that, from relating, self-awareness, authenticity, systems awareness, achieving, and then we go into the reactive one, controlling, protecting, and complying. And you can start to see when that scale moves from 1, how those creative sides start to adjust on the performance index and where the leadership effectiveness is at. Then down at the bottom, you can see some of the things that they bounce at again. So 1, sales revenue growth, 2, market share, 3, profitability and ROI, 4, quality of products and services, 5, new product development, and 6, overall performance. The other thing you can see, since with the way the graph lays out, you can see where they go from business performance index of 1 and business performance index of 1, how as you move from those creative, how they impact those business performance index across the first row, to as you move into those reactive parts, how it starts to move it from a positive to a negative also. You'll also see that the number of observations down here in the bottom line give you an idea of the amount of data that they collected to generate this. I see a couple questions in the chat. Are these new ones or maybe not? Okay. All right, so we have to say, why now? What's the argument for leadership development now? So leadership matters because it impacts performance, culture, engagement. We've all heard about the Great Resignation, agility, and innovation. And underneath this, we actually know what this is. So some of those differences that we see between traditional management and agile leadership. So our business metaphor, the organization is machine focused and it's on process over people. When we think about agile leadership, we see an organic structure of relationships occurring, and they're really focused on the culture. The authority in traditional is directive and controlling, and it's top down. In that agile leadership, again, we're seeing participation by the entire group. Everybody has a voice, and it's bottom up. Within the people, traditional, we see them as instruments, resources, very mechanicistic. Agile, we see them as great assets, and they have the knowledge within them and the creativity to come up with these great solutions. The leadership styles between these two, and the one on the left, we see they can be distant, cold, detached, command and control, autocratic, versus the one on the right, they're very connected and present. Democratic or laissez-faire leadership style, and they're very adaptive depending upon who they're sharing that leadership with. The supervisory approach here, again, we see that control, punitive, dictative on the left. On the right, they tend to listen, they facilitate, they encourage. And the service orientation, again, in traditional, it's outside in. It's the system around them, impacting them, and they're self-serving. What can you do for me and the organization? In agile leadership, it's inside out, other serving. What can I do to help you fulfill your goals and missions? So when we start to talk about how we grow and that effectiveness, it's mediated by that gap between self and circumstance. I lost part of my piece. So these are the complexities of the mind as we go through different, depending upon what stage of our life we're in. So a lot of times at this egocentric, we'll see, and there tends to be an age correlation with this. We'll see this typically with teenagers, and they might be real early 20s, just within that. And then they move into that next piece where they may be reactive. And again, that's that next progression as they move between self and circumstances. Now you'll see that development challenge or opportunity comes when they, between that reactive and all the way up to the integral piece, and where they can start to expand and grow and move into that creative and integral spot. So, and as you can see, the VUCA, the higher that becomes, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And you can see where the egocentric and the reactive really comes out when you see more stability, certainty, simplicity, and clarity. So, and that's where you really get an opportunity to see between the reactive and the creative to develop and grow to that creative and that integral. So we can see how that looks there. All right, so now let's get into why some leadership programs don't work. Because a lot of people think, well, I can do that. I could just go take a leadership program and it'll help fix this, or I could go read a book or something. So a lot of times they have the wrong focus. They deliver a lot of content, not enough time spent on practice. Okay, they may lack connectivity. So your company may have a leadership program. They pull these leaders and managers out. They put them in a 2-day or week-long workshop, and then they set them back, and it just doesn't connect with how the real world is around them. And they just don't have the opportunity to convert it to how it helps them address the problems they're dealing with today. Another one, leader in isolation. So a different instance, a lot of programs fail to create a support and accountability from colleagues and key stakeholders. Or they may go out, take this great training, and want to come back and start to use it and leverage it and share it. And you'll see they experience resistance from those that they're disrupting by the changes that they're asking to be there. The other piece is it may be too short. The programs are designed as events rather than as a process over time. Programs give leaders a short-term boost, but not the ongoing follow-up to solidify and help them continue with those new mindsets and new ways of being to create solid habits. So how do we design, or what kind of programs that you look for that helps you solve for these issues? So we want to focus more on the development piece and less on the content. The next piece that we talked about, you want to create strong development networks at work. So even if you take a program that's focused on the develop, when you come back into your work environment, create a network or mentoring around you that allows you to continue to practice these new behaviors. Nextly, make the development and the work inseparable. So it's not this thing over here and how do I make it relate over here? Let's bring them together and say, okay, I learned this thing. How can I leverage it in the work today? So it's related. And make leadership development a process learn event. So it's ongoing. We're continuously improving. So within that, there's two different types of frameworks within those programs. We have horizontal and vertical development. So what's the difference between those? So horizontal development is literally about adding more knowledge, skills, and competencies. So as you can see in the picture here, it's about pouring more water into glass. Vertical approaches grow the internal capacities, bring awareness to think more about complex systematic strategies in independent ways. So this helps expand an individual's abilities to handle complexity in a whole new way and make sense of things. So we're increasing the glass size, or as we say, the leader's mindset. So horizontal developments, again, we're focusing on expertise, whereas vertical are helping people put knowledge into practice. So we're always going to have a need where employees will need the basic skills to meet the demands of their positions. However, we want to help them develop the human skills that are now critical to solving those big problems. So we're going to leverage vertical to grow the mind of the leader and to enable transformational capabilities. Okay, we want to become, you can see some keywords here: adaptive, self-aware, collaborative, and be able to span multiple boundaries. And then vertical development does not replace horizontal development. There's a balance of both to help this come out. Now, just to give you some ideas, because you've probably seen some of these out here today of, okay, I know what some of these are. Do they fall into horizontal or vertical? Now, first and foremost, we want to bring awareness. So, and that's by shining the light on the mindsets that drive the current behavior through 360s. And this helps leaders identify and start to build out a path to that new way of building. So in our horizontal frameworks, and again, this is focused on expertise. Some of your familiar ones out there, Hogan, Mayo. Mayo has a leadership 360 that they leverage from, and I can't remember which company they leverage from. There's the Clifton Strengths out there, EQI 2.0, Energy Leadership Index, Everything DISC, Tiny Pulse. The shift to your vertical that puts the knowledge to practice, there's two out there. It's the leadership circle, or we call it the LCP 360, which is going to really illuminate that leader's or even a team member's inner world behind the behavior. The other one is Enneagram. And this is a complementary overlay to the LCP 360. So you can see more robust and being these. Now the leadership circle is a 360, the Enneagram is not. just to give a little bit of feedback behind that. So the Enneagram, you may get some initial pieces and parts of what that vertical looks like, that knowledge to practice. The leadership circle is really going to give you that, how effective are you as a leader? Even if you're not in a position where you have direct reports, you still have leadership effectiveness.
Dorothy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you ever, sometimes it's really hard to get leadership to even try to go down this path.
Mhm.
Have you been successful trying to motivate them?
It's truly, as an enterprise coach, it's a partnering with the HR or the L&D department to help bring all these pieces together to make that happen. So that's first and foremost, because a lot of times with the information you have and leveraging what your HR L&D department already has,
Yep.
and adding in that awareness component here with a 360. And a lot of times they'll say, well, we already have a 360. It may be being used more as a performance tool instead of a leadership development tool. And that's a full shift. And they may not even be looking at the effectiveness of their leader. It may, again, if they're just looking at performance. Does that help answer your question, Sue?
It does.
Yeah. So every time I've gone in and I've had an organization come and ask me about leadership development or agile leadership development, I always go partner with the HR L&D part of the department and say, okay, what leadership workshops do you already have? And then start to put something together based upon what comes out of their 360. Say, okay, what resonates with you? And then what training do you need to, again, the horizontal development goes together.
Mhm.
What additional skills do we need to add to that? And then work with the HR department to build out a mentoring and coaching program so they have the space and the safety to practice those skills and they resonate within the organization so they can literally take those skills and take them back to their own work and leverage them right away. So that's really key.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
So the first part of this, when you get that awareness in those 360s, what can you do with that feedback? So leadership development planning. So, and I help a lot of people with this when they go through and take a 360. It says, don't obsess about what you immediately see, because what you don't like. There's lots of positive stuff on there. Let's look at that. So we can't boil the ocean. Find one big thing to work towards. Okay. And then select 2 supporting behaviors that you want to do more of and less of. So incrementally work towards it. Be authentic, transparent, share with those who you work with. So you building that supporting network around you to help you practice and make relevant those new skills you're working towards. And then do continue to explore underlying reactive beliefs and assumptions as you go through this. Because a lot of times when you first look at one of those 360s, you go, man, look at all this bad stuff. Wait a minute, there's some good stuff. And what's one thing we really want to go? What's one thing you think can make an impact? You can move the needle on. All right, so what are some of those enabling factors that allow for that shift? I didn't realize, I'm sorry, everybody, I didn't realize the text ended up so small. So as we can see on creative leadership, they're self-authored, they have purpose, and they have service. Now the tension across to that reactive from self-authored, they may be other-authored. So is it coming from within, or is an external tension or stressor coming in to cause them to be reactive? Okay, the safety and the purpose, you can see there, again, tensions. Is it the purpose coming from inside purpose, or they're in a place of safety because of the tension around them? Cameron. And again, it's how they're really thinking about that to enable the shift. And then you can see the service tension, ambitious. Are they there trying to climb the ladder to get and they're being pushed to climb the ladder, or are they coming from a place of service to enable? So in some 6 conditions that require this for scale: creative leadership, deep relationships, radically human, system awareness, purposeful achievement, and generative tension. So transformation starts within so that we can build that capability. All right, so we've talked a lot about ourselves. How do we scale that to others? So the leadership ability we're born with must be developed and exercised, as we've talked through quite a bit here. And in experience, there's 3 steps to scale this leadership to your peers, your team members, and those around you. So as I mentioned in the previous slides, start with yourself. Change starts within, and then it can radiate out. So awareness, and you achieve those through your vertical development. Gather feedback from your rich environment. Even if you don't go take a 360, there is lots of great ways to gather feedback from those around you to get an idea of where you're at. Focus on one big thing and reach out for help, coaching, mentoring. Even if your company doesn't have a formal mentoring or coaching program, a lot of people within your company are more than eager to mentor. And this may be either leadership coaching or mentoring, as mentioned. Develop leadership teams. Okay. And that's through leading the development agenda. Assess individual and collective effectiveness. So not just an individual, but you can group several individuals together to get a collective on what is this leadership team? How effective are they? We want to get the right people in place and build alignment around what matters. And this is key, especially when it's co-created together and people will really get behind it and it resonates to them. And then we also want to build leadership systems. And again, creating a developmental organization. And you guys hear a lot about this in not just Agile, but companies today, they're transforming because they want to build that culture of learning. We want to focus on measuring results. If we don't know where we're at today, where we're going to go, we don't know if we're making progress, or if we're on the right path and we need to adjust. And institutionalize the development agenda within your organization. And then people who make the most progress scaling leadership do 2 additional things to help them change personally, internally, while helping that transformation. They take a long-term approach to development, and they lead the change with public transparency, personally, and vulnerability. And I know for a lot of people, that's hard to be vulnerable in front of others. All right, that's what I have for you today. Any additional questions?
Any kind of first steps you'd recommend, if we're talking to somebody at a company who felt like the leadership was challenged?
I would highly recommend explore what type of leadership development programs they have today. And they may think, when you first go to them and say leadership development, say, oh, we have training. And explore with them, is that just an event? Or is there, what kind of coaching and mentoring is available to the people that start this journey to help them practice and adopt these new skills so they become habits? And I always take the question a step further beyond that. A lot of times we say, well, what's stopping us from doing that? The flip side of that is, what can I do to help make this happen? Good question. And I'm more than happy to share this deck with everybody. We'll make it available. I'll turn it into a PDF.
I'm in an organization that has a very robust leadership development program. but it's very hard. Like Agile hasn't had an impact on it. So it's trying to get conversations going to try to impact it into a more agile way, a more agile mindset.
And a lot of today's, and this is why I say partner with HR, because a lot of, if your HR department's leveraging a lot of the newer leadership training programs today,
Mhm.
they have the agile mindset items built in. When you think about, empowering, coaching, talent development for teams today. And a lot of times it's just bringing in the awareness piece to help say people be aware of, oh, I need to focus in on this thing to move the needle on my effectiveness. Here's the training that's already here. Here's the pieces I take. And then a lot of them do not have coaching and mentoring available or set up and running. And that's the other piece, to create the environment so that they can continue to practice and make it relevant for their work. And I think a lot of companies think that it's very expensive to start to do that, whereas it truly can be organic.
Yeah.
Instead of bringing in the coaching piece, start with the mentoring piece. Who's willing to, innovate, who has capacity to start to stand this up, and then start to put out that word of who would like to volunteer to mentor.
Where, you know how you have the leadership and the management styles, everything from command and control to, like, prior to Agile, you had command and control to like participatory management. And then you're making the leap from participatory to servant leadership. So the organization I'm in is very heavy on the participatory. Most of the leading leadership classes, which they have a significant amount of, are at the participatory end. So it's not like that. If it was real command and control to servant leadership, you could see a really big change. Whereas participatory leadership style to servant leader, yeah, it's a change and it's an important change, but it's not as big. It's not as easy to see.
And that's where the measurement piece truly comes into play.
Yeah.
Alan, you had a question. How can we change a structured plan into actions that could change lives? Great question. I think the first piece is truly the awareness, and then building out that development plan. And then when you measure it, you can see the progress they're making. And as they check in against, okay, I did this thing, when I measure it, did it change that key result that I was looking for? Oh, it did. I'm on the right path, and you can continue it. Or it didn't change that result I was looking for, and it change in the adjust what they're doing so that they can get the result that they want to. Good question, Ellen. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Everybody's-
Personal
everybody's-
experience? You guys are all pretty quiet. Flip on those videos. Come on. Any other experiences you guys have had that you want to share?
Dorothy, I'm a little curious if you go in as a coach into a specific company, what is it that what's your first step? Are you kind of seeing the leadership styles and then basically adapting your methods to that?
A lot of the engagements they bring me in for is for transformation. And of course, part of it could be leadership and a lot of other pieces. So, and as we go through that first step in, you were talking about change management. When you go through that first step, the first thing is awareness, and then co-creation of what that change strategy is going to be, and alignment. Is everybody on board for what that is? So that's always my first step, is in that awareness piece, is the discovery and exploration of what their pain points are. What's keeping you awake? What's keeping you up at night? What is working for you? What's not working for you? And start to bring that together so that we could start to see, oh, this is occurring. So here's, what are you willing to do differently to resolve that? And through that co-creation, and for a lot of people out there today, to take that consultant hat off and move into the co-creation and asking them, what are you willing to do different? Then they come up with the answers within themselves to move through that. Now, they may say, well, is that the best thing to do? And I can show them, industry best practices and other white papers of what other large organizations have done through the way. And they can say, how does this resonate with you? And then they can say, oh, that looks good. Oh, that doesn't fit with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
All right. It's a pretty quiet Tuesday. People had a long day on Zoom, or I don't know. Anybody else throw out some questions, comments, thoughts, leadership?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned that you approach leadership to find out what they have and find out what's working and what might not be working, et cetera. Do you ever take the opportunity to meet with the teams and the individuals that are engaged in this approach, let's say, to see on their end, on the individual workers, on the teams, is it actually working? Or are you just taking on the feedback from leadership that, this fails, and from their perspective on why it's failing or succeeding?
It's a sampling all the way up and down the org chart. And
Great.
And it's interesting because, especially over my own experience over the years, from having actually early on in my career, I was very much used to dedicated teams, until today we have a lot of these monolithic companies that are very, very old, that their idea of a team is, I'm a manager and here's all my direct reports, that's my team. And they're pushing people to the work, or, these are all our late adopters today. And they're managing the work, and they're managing the people, and they're prioritizing the work, and we go down the list. They're overwhelmed. There's too much. As they work through that, yes, those managers have an idea, and their management has an idea. But yes, when we take a sampling of the people actually doing the work, we get another layer of what's occurring, what's working, what's not. Okay.
Right.
We also get a good sampling of just what the organization's threshold is to change, because they may be in change fatigue already. And so another big change may not be helpful. It may be just really a small piece to start to unweave what's there now.
Right.
And through that discovery, we start to see that. As well as, like I said, those frontline workers a lot of times will tell us, leadership brings the weather. They'll give us a good idea of those frontline workers of what the weather is around.
That's right. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
So how do I influence teams? It's truly about building relationships and partnerships with them. So again, when you think about how to implement this, who's the right people that you pull in to co-create your proposal, and then are you the right one to go present it, or is one of those people you pulled in have enough sway to go present it for you? Or as you work through it, you present to them first, they get excited and they go tell someone else to help make it happen. It's truly around the relationships and the co-creation where that influence happens. And I'll be the first to share. Sometimes my first proposal I write and go float up the way and present gets nailed down, or they come back and say, no, we're gonna do, we like it, but we can only do one part of it. So you meet them where they're at as you work through it. And believe me, I've had some organizations just tell me, I've presented 3 or 4 or 5 times and just say no. Previous client I presented to, and it's like, no, just tell us what we need to do different.
Just tell us.
Even when I showed them on the one slide you guys saw why some programs don't work, and they specifically asked me to go do one of those things, lots of content in a 30-minute or a 1-hour meeting.
Dorothy, what advice would you give to a leader leading overcommitted teams?
So first and foremost, your own internal awareness where you're at. And as I showed, there's several different ways to gain that awareness. 2, invite those people in to get feedback from them, and help check yourself that when they provide feedback that you don't just jump in and say, well, blah, blah, blah. No, stop, really think, count to 10, and just listen to everything they share. Because 9 times out of 10, what they're going to share is not personal. It's not personal to you. It's personal to them because it's impacting their own life. Sometimes they'll come across in a neutral way. Some do, because they're also building their own leadership skills. And then depending upon, because some leaders process information on the fly, some need to take it and go back and regurgitate on it. And then, whatever your own style is, really just take that rich information and then just work through it on, how does this make me feel? How do I want to do this different?
Thank you.
Now, I did showcase the leadership circle profile this evening. Anybody that's interested in that 360 assessment, I am a certified practitioner to deliver that. I'm not here to sales pitch you anybody into it, but if you're interested, I'm more than happy to put together something on what that would look like and a coaching plan around it, and whether it's for an individual or a small team or an organization. So it's up to anybody here. And as you saw, there's other programs out there. So if you're more interested in the Enneagram, I'm more than happy to share the links to where you can find facilitators for the Enneagram.
All right. Thank you very much, Dorothy, and thank you everyone for joining. So our presentation next month, which is on May the 17th, is Steve Nunziato. Now, Steve is an Agile coach with 20 years experience working for Eliason, and he's going to do a presentation on what is disciplined Agile. So disciplined Agile, or DADS, is now part of PMP and the Project Management Institute, and he will do a presentation on that. Hope to see everyone there.
Yeah. Anybody have experience using that? Anybody on the call? Just curious. I know I haven't, but. some thank yous in the chats there. It's great.
So we
Let's see
will
if you want to
Yep.
stop the recording.
I'll stop the recording.
I almost forgot.
Stop